just start with a Buddhist chant. This is how usually we'll start Dhamma talks or sharing a reflection on the Dhamma, which is the teaching of the Buddha. It's in the Pali language, and Pali is to Southeast Asian Buddhism, kind of what Latin is to Catholicism. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasahami. So I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. I know part of Unitarianism, at least as I experienced it, was a little bit of intimidation by seeming religious clergy in outfits. So I thought to maybe just bridge the gap in people's mind between Unitarianism and Buddhism. I've been thinking about this for a couple days, and one very easy way to summarize the similarities and slight differences are to say that Buddhism is like Unitarianism with rebirth and renunciation, and Unitarianism is like Buddhism with chairs. You guys got chairs. You guys have chairs. Yeah, and you have that Frankenstein dance. I don't know if anybody was in the service today, but yeah, there was a Frankenstein dance. We don't usually do that in Buddhist sermons, but yeah, there are a lot of overlaps, and I feel really grateful for my mother in particular to have raised me as a Unitarian. I think it's a great way to raise children. You really do. Certainly, I got a fantastic religious education, which is basically presenting the children and all of the adults as well with a whole smorgasbord, so to speak, of different religious traditions, different beliefs that you can choose from and decide what resonates most. So the six, I think, sources of Unitarianism, you've got earth-centered religions, earth-centered traditions, you've got Christianity and Judaism, you've got other world religions like Buddhism or like Hinduism, some Taoist teachings, you've got prophetic teachings from social justice teachers, you've got humanist teachings, and these are all great. You open up the Buddhist hymnal and there's a lot of inspiring things. One of the songs which was sung in this morning's service, I came with my mom, and it was that love enables greed to turn to giving, something to that effect. So it's just really picking up a lot of principles which are in many different Buddhist traditions and certainly are at the heart of a lot of Buddhism just growing up. So I grew up even before I remembered being given some kind of ceremony when I was, before I was one, and then all through elementary school, up through high school, attending Unitarian churches, and then I even attended the Amnesty International meetings, a very Buddhist thing to do. I did very many Buddhist things. I even wrote a theme song for Amnesty International, which, depending on what kind of crowd this is, I may or may not share that with you later. It's not the most Buddhist monk thing, but we'll see how things go. Then I went to did a very Unitarian thing before college, which is I joined AmeriCorps, which is like Peace Corps in America. And it was there that I started exploring, just following my own intuition around readings. And I became rather enamored with the Beats and read On the Road, and then read Dharma Bums, which is another book by Jack Kerouac, and read in the preface to the Dharma Bums about Jack Kerouac's own Buddhist background, which was a book called The Buddhist Bible by this very kind of eccentric American in the 1920s who created his own monastery. He lived for a very brief time in Japan and then created a Buddhist monastery just by himself. And he pulled together all these texts from different Buddhist traditions, of which, largely speaking, there are three main Buddhist traditions. You've got the Buddhism of Southeast Asia, of Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka, which is what I ordained into. It's kind of the earliest strata of Buddhist teachings. Then you've got the Buddhism of East Asia, so that's of China, of Japan, of Korea, and that's called Mahayana Buddhism. And then you've got the Buddhism of Tibet, or Vajrayana Buddhism. And while I was in AmeriCorps, was reading this book, and we're building houses and worked at this swamp and digging around in the swamp and doing all sorts of dirty things, and would find myself after work having the energy to read through this book. And I only realized after I finished my stint in AmeriCorps, looking back at the book, turned the Buddhist Bible, which was three parts of each of those three schools, the Theravada, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. After AmeriCorps, I looked at my book from the side, and the first third of it, which is all about Theravada, you could just see on the sides of the book, they were all filthy. All the pages were just totally caked in dirt. You could tell what I was leafing through obsessively, and just hadn't even realized it, but was just utterly fascinated and drawn to this early form of Buddhism, which has as its main script or main language Pali. So yeah, I didn't have anything against Chinese Buddhism. In fact, I had been going to a Chinese language school since kindergarten, had a lot of love for Chinese culture, but I just found myself drawn to this type of early Buddhism, which is a very practical teaching. And so I thought for today to kind of try to weave in three threads into the presentation. One of them is just the thread of my own biography, of which I've started to go into a little bit. One is the thread in what's called in Buddhism, what's called the triple gem, G-E-M, the triple gem, the triple jewel, which is the Buddha, who is the teacher, the Dhamma or the Dharma, which is his teaching, and the Sangha, which is in its most specific form, the group of monastics, monks and nuns, practitioners who wear this outfit. And that's why I'm wearing this outfit, is because it's basically the same from the time of the Buddha. And it's a bunch of rectangles. And it's fabulous. If you've never lived in rectangles, I highly recommend it. Extremely foldable. Basically, I live in my sheets. I can make a tent out of my clothing. You probably can't do that. No pressure to join, but yeah, monastics have been wearing this outfit, these rectangles, since the time of the Buddha. The Buddha himself was a monk and wore robes very similar to this. So will be one thread, my own biography. Second thread is the triple gem, Buddha, the principle of awakening, the teacher, the Dharma, his teaching, the truth of the way things are, and the Sangha, enlightened practitioners. And I'll go more into what that means in a Buddhist context. And the principle of love. So an interesting thing. You've got awakening, truth, and love. So we'll speak to the different ways that these symbols, these jewels manifest. As another aside, right now is my mother, the beautiful Paula Hillard. What she mentioned, I'm currently starting a monastery in Seattle with my monk brother, Ajahn Nisabo, and we don't yet have land, but there's a very nice Episcopal church which lets us use their space, specifically their gym. So we call it the Triple Gym, G-Y-M, just as an aside. Good. I love that Unitarians love puns, because you're going to get a lot. I feel like you only have yourselves to blame for my punniness. And the third thread that I'm going to kind of weave through things is the thread of my Unitarianism, specifically my growing fascination with the teachings of Emerson and Thoreau, Thoreau being almost like the patron saint of Unitarianism. So after my AmeriCorps stint, again, I did something very Unitarian, and I went to a small liberal arts school in Massachusetts called Hampshire, which was very Unitarian in the fact that there were no grades, no required classes, just like totally Unitarian all the way down. And it was there that I met a teacher named Alan Hodder, who I've really kept in touch with every couple years since that time. And he taught two classes that really shaped the rest of my life. The first being a class on world religions, in which I started reading more Buddhist texts. I had already been inspired by that Buddhist Bible. Had a friend who gave me the Dhammapada, which is kind of a poetry almost of the Buddha, and reading all sorts of other world religions. And then the second class was on the transcendentalists, most specifically Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Henry David Thoreau. And so I'll have a few quotes that I'll actually, in our tradition, the forest tradition, I ordained in the what's called the Thai forest tradition of Theravada Buddhism. We typically don't use any notes for our talks. There's an emphasis on being spontaneous, but I don't want to misquote Emerson. And he's got some long, awesome quotes, which all of you will just have to stand up and shout about. So I don't want to misquote him, so I'll be pulling out my notebook in a minute. But yeah, ended up being very inspired by that class. And if you're a Unitarian, it really makes sense to read a lot of Thoreau. And if you read a lot of Thoreau, it's hard not to be affected. I ended up, I'll kind of jump forward and back here, but ended up dropping out of university. And one of the first things I did was to put together a zine, a small little magazine, which is basically an essay by Thoreau called Life Without Principle, which starts with the adage, let us all consider the way in which we live our lives, which really did affect, it was a through line through really the rest of my life. And I printed a bunch of these and then gave them out for free, and highly recommend that article for people. But two events which really had a big influence on my life before I dropped out were, one, a experience absolutely anxiolytic. And what that means is I didn't even realize the extent to which I was operating every day by myself and others with a low-level hum of anxiety. Boom, just drop that down to a level which I'd never experienced in my life. And it didn't just last 12 hours, it lasted about 6 weeks. So I went about for those 6 weeks feeling like I had no anxiety, feeling like I had no, feeling like I was enlightened in a certain kind of way. And the sad thing is that I didn't create that. I didn't know how I did that. I didn't know how I did it, how that came about. And so after those 6 weeks, anxiety starts ramping up. And then in Buddhism, there's something it's called the second arrow, which is the principle that pain, like physical pain, we all have bodies, pain is inevitable. Even the Buddha had physical pain. So that's like the first arrow. We're hit, as soon as we're born, we're hit with this first arrow, which is susceptibility to physical discomfiture, to unsatisfactoriness. But what an enlightened being does is do this next part, which is they no longer add a second arrow. So pain is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. Suffering is optional. And so a Buddha, enlightened beings, just never stab themselves with that second arrow, and they can bear any of that first arrow, any physical discomfiture that comes up. They just won't problematize it. They won't add add another head to the whole thing. So just by accident of chemistry, I wasn't stabbing myself for that month and a half with more problems. I wasn't creating more problems for myself. But then it's gone, and I'm left with this problem. How the heck do I get that back? And so I end up following a Unitarian friend from university, recommends a meditation retreat. And that is where my practice in my life takes another tangent. Really, it's almost this psychological or spiritual equivalent of getting struck by lightning. But to hear that, you're going to have to meditate for another 7 minutes. So for this meditation, also lightly guided, we'll start as we did with the last meditation, is setting the body in a posture which is upright, but not uptight. Stretching and elongating that central column of the spine and everything else, all the internal organs, all the external muscles. Everything can just relax around that. And with this meditation, rather than scanning the body, we'll be giving the mind, the heart, another task. And people might have some kind of idea that meditation is just spacing out or not doing anything. But really, the Buddha taught many skillful means, many specific ways to use thought or to use the mind in order to still thoughts, in order to still the heart. So for this, we'll pay attention to the breath. And the breath is something which is, of course, not at all Buddhist. And it is something which the Buddha himself practiced, is learning how to be content with this very simple, absolutely quotidian, absolutely normal phenomenon, which we just utterly ignore for the vast majority of our lives and our days. And so just start bringing awareness to the upper lip and the area around the nose. And we'll just watch and try to be with every in-breath and every out-breath. And you can notice as you breathe in through the nose, just naturally, no need to elongate the breath or do anything special. But you'll notice, and you may have never noticed this before, but as you breathe in, there's a little bit of coolness. The breath passing over the upper lip into the nose, it's a little bit cooler as you breathe in, and then as the breath fills the lungs and then exhales out the nostrils, it's a little bit warmer. And there's no reason why this has to be boring. In fact, the breath can really become a friend. It can become a fascinating object of study. We spend lots of hours meditating in monasteries. And it's not torture. It really becomes interesting when you pay attention. And because we're not used to it, it can be helpful to actually add a meditation word to the breath. So one we use in the Thai forest tradition is just Buddho. The name of the Buddha, it just means awake. Bud on the in-breath, Do on the out-breath. But really you can use any words or any sounds which allow you to stay with the breath. The full in-breath and the full beginning, middle, and end of the out-breath. The in-breath can be accepting, and the out-breath letting go. In or out. Really, it's just a tool, a technology to allow us to immerse the mind in a very simple object. And we'll just stay here for a few minutes and having one part of the mind as this metta of overlooking awareness, which knows if you're holding on too tight, knows how you're relating to the breath. And we want to know the breath as we would pay attention to a friend, very kindly. And so just sitting with every in-breath and every out-breath. Okay. So I should just probably admit that uh, probably my strongest intention and hope for this sharing is that my mom walks away feeling like Buddhism is cool. So please do afterwards greet the beautiful Paula Hillard and tell her Buddhism is cool if you can. No pressure. We don't encourage lies in Buddhism, but if you can, if you think it's even a little bit cool. So I'll share my first Thoreau quote. So we should treat our minds, that is ourselves, as innocent and ingenuous children whose guardians we are, and be careful what objects and what subjects we trust on their attention. Read not the times, read the eternities. So yes, it built up suspense. We're walking into the first meditation retreat. And I'm curious, who here has sat a meditation retreat before? Okay, we got some people. Great. That's great. So there are different types of meditation retreats. The one that I sat, and it was my first, it's a pretty serious endeavor. It's really jumping in the deep end. It's what's called a Goenka based. Goenka is the name of the Indian Burmese gentleman who spread the technique around the world. But Vipassana, which is a Pali word which means clear seeing. So it's a Goenka Vipassana retreat, 10 days, and you go in there and you're basically meditating for 10 hours a day with very specific objects. So for the first 3 days, you're just watching the breath at the tip of your nose all day, every hour. There's no surprise. There's no surprise. There's no secret at the end of the day. It's just more watching the breath. And then the next 7 days is scanning the body, similar to what we did at the beginning of this, is really learning how to re-embody, allowing the mind to come back into the body and seeing and feeling the impermanent nature of the body. So yeah, I had never done anything like this. I had meditated a little bit before, just practice based on reading books, all those books that I've told you about. And actually before that mushroom trip, I think part of what conditioned the experience of that was I had been practicing with this Tibetan Buddhist mantra, which said, let me be the lowest amongst all and fervently hold others as superior. So kind of this training, this mind training, which I just never really encountered outside of a Buddhist context. So I was kind of saying that as a mantra to myself while I went into that experience. But here I am at this meditation retreat and really hadn't sat for more than half an hour beforehand. And I'm told to just watch the breath, at the tip of the nose. And it was very humbling. It was very humbling. I'd say that my favorite non-Buddhist quote is from Pascal, who says, all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. So all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. I love it so much that I memorized it in French, and I don't even speak French. So what a fascinating and utterly humbling quote. Like you would think we're adults. I was 20 years old. I thought I was an adult at that time. And we would all think, oh, I should be able to just sit quietly in a room alone without any problem. But try it, try it sometime. And that is not easy. It is not easy to just be with ourselves. And that's a fascinating and, as I said, a humbling realization. Why can't I do that? It just seems like you should. We're humans. I was raised Unitarian, for gosh sakes. Gosh, I should be able to do this. And that was not the case. And a number of the insights that I had on that retreat was just one, that the education that I was involved in at that time at Hampshire College was just, yeah, I was a good student, smart person. My parents were smart people. They are smart people. Mom's a OBGYN, dad's a psychiatrist, smart people, brothers, works for Wikipedia, smart person. And I came to feel very much, even on that first day, as I descended into the hell of my own experience, that the education that I was involved in was just utterly superficial compared to just just watch the concentration and attention that it takes to just be with something that's very simple. This was 2003 when I did my first meditation retreat, and there were no smartphones. I certainly didn't have one at that time. But for this retreat, we had to give up all of our phone. I didn't, phones weren't exciting that day, so I gave up my phone. But you give up reading, you give up entertainment. I was giving up everything, which was a source of all my happiness, and really was the source of all the happiness which I was working towards. Like, most, we all go to college because we want to get a good job. We want to learn some stuff, but we also want a good job to make some money, to be able to afford all the things which bring us happiness. And yeah, this is another Thoreau quote. I didn't say it. It's not Buddhist. Thoreau said, "A person is rich in proportion to the number of things which they can afford to let alone." So that was fascinating, and I was starting to experience that in this retreat. So I'm first day, really just seeing that my mind is utterly out of control. I'd never just tried to watch. I'd just been distracting myself, despite all of my parents' good intentions, despite my own good intentions. Really, there's just so much distraction that's part and parcel of a modern American existence. And so I come to something where there's no distraction. All of my avenues for distraction are gone, and it sucks. It sucks. I just, am just watching, forgetting, to come back to the breath. And then I remember, and then I hate myself for forgetting to be with my breath for 2 minutes. And then it's like on and on like that for day one. And then day two, it's like I'm going deeper into hell. It's like I'm going deeper into hell, just seeing that, like, what kind of human am I? What kind of human am I? And just watching the tendency of mind. One instruction, Kovilo, that's my name. I was Ian still at that time, still not a monk at that time. Ian, all you have to do, just watch the breath. You don't even get to choose. Just watch it at the tip of the nose. And I couldn't do it. It felt like an utter failure. And just going and watching just how utterly untrained my mind was, and just feeling like, God, what a bad human. What a bad human I am. And continuing at this day one, day two, and day three, and almost by grace. It's just not totally by grace, because part of the underlying principle of Buddhism, the foundational faith in Buddhism, if I were to ask what that is, anybody? I will ask. What is the foundational faith of Buddhism? That is a very good answer. That is a very good answer. And existence is suffering. So I will get to that. That is the first of what is called the Four Noble Truths. But a bit more foundational of that. I was thinking that maybe you all are probably more educated than I was as a Buddhist, but you might think, oh, Buddhists believe in the Buddha as like some kind of guy who will save you, or like Buddhism is all about believing in rebirth. What do you guys believe in? you believe in like, rebirth and stuff. But much more foundational than that is this supposition, which is in a sutta or a discourse, which is it is possible. This is a direct quote from the Buddha, extremely practical. It is possible to abandon unwholesome mental states, and it is possible to cultivate wholesome mental states. And that is profound. And I would encourage you, all of you, to just take that on. If you've never thought about it, is it possible? Can I really abandon unwholesome mental states and cultivate wholesome mental states? You're operating from a supposition of whether or not you think that's possible. And really, it is almost the definition of depression, that the mind has fallen into a state that doesn't believe that it's possible to abandon unwholesome mental states. I'm just a slave and a victim of my brain chemistry or of some God who's cursed me or whatever it is. But in Buddhism, it's not determined. It's not happenstance. It's not, just all an accident. There is a conditionality that the universe works on that, okay, it is possible for a human to abandon unwholesome mental states. And after 3 days on this meditation retreat of, okay, abandon all the distraction. I'm running out thinking about all these great ideas. Actually, we're not supposed to do anything on this retreat, just watch the breath. Day 1.5, I actually went into the trash. I found an old bar of soap. I found a box of tea, and I carved a small little Buddha. And I was thinking, oh, this is real. I'm doing something super meditational. I'm carving this Buddha, and I'm going to give it to somebody, because I totally couldn't sit with my breath. I couldn't just be with myself. So I carve a little Buddha. I'm not even Buddhist at the time, but find a way to distract myself. No entertainment, but I can carve a little soap Buddha. So I did that, but okay, I'm trying, come back to the breath, abandoning distraction, and that's what we're doing in these guided meditation, and we might have one more depending on how many questions there are, but we're abandoning distraction, thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, or just all sorts of wishy-washy thoughts about the present are just fluttering. We're just bombarded by all sorts of distraction. In Buddhism, there's what's called the 5 hindrances to peace of mind. And you can think of them, it's an easy way to remember them, as ways that we lean with the body. So the 5 hindrances are craving. This is the leaning into, rather than being upright and really seeing things as they are. When we crave and when we have strong desires for drugs, for alcohol, for food, whatever it is, we are not seeing clearly. We're not seeing what's for our own benefit or for the benefit of others or for the benefit of both. We're just craving it. We're thinking, oh, Doritos. I'm going to get some Doritos in a minute. And we're just totally leaning into the future taste of the Doritos. The second hindrance is aversion. This is the leaning away. I don't want it. I don't like you. I don't like what my spouse is saying. Just no. Whereas we don't have to do that. That's second arrow suffering. And we justify it. We have lots of ways of justifying our greed and our anger. But it is not totally seeing clearly when we've got the goggles of anger and aversion on. The third hindrance to seeing clearly is sloth and torpor. And these are all the SL words, like sluggish and slothful and sloppy. And this is like the downward movement of the body. And you're just falling asleep. The laziness of the mind. And when we're just falling asleep, we're not seeing clearly. And of course, the body does need rest. But this is the type of slogginess, which is really a subtle and unconscious way of turning off. So this is the falling down, and then the kind of anxiety of restlessness and remorse, which is just totally up in our heads. And then the fifth hindrance is doubt, which is just totally just spinning around. And you'll be happy to know that in Buddhism, there is a place almost foundational for intelligent doubting. In fact, I've heard that faith in Buddhism, one, I think, very cool way of defining faith in Buddhism is skill in doubt. Skill in your doubt. The fifth hindrance is the type of doubt that just has no end. It's the type of mindset, and if you've just yeah, been raised in a very cerebral culture, which just encourages questioning without end. There's no harm. In fact, a big part of Buddhism is questioning. But if you don't know how to not question, how to stop when it's tiring you out, then that is a skill that a human can develop. And that's what we're developing in meditation, is ways of just being more upright. So after a day and a half, 2 days of just training and okay, coming back from my craving, coming upright from my aversion, not falling asleep or getting super uptight. Day 3, it feels, even though it is causal, I've been putting in the conditions, okay, abandoning distraction, cultivating one-pointedness. Day 3, after these 2.5 days of hell, feel like I'm blessed into a heaven, basically, a level of happiness and contentment that I had never experienced, even with, again, I'll say it again, phones sucked at that time, but all the happiness of phones and happiness of entertainment and happiness of music, and I was a good dancer. You won't see any of that because we don't dance as monks. Sorry, sorry. But no pressure. Buddhists can dance, just monks we don't dance. But you missed out. It would have been great if you had met me 20 years ago and you could have seen me dance. But yeah, just all of the ways that I was used to seeking gratification. And, it's not evil. Dancing isn't evil. Certainly, like, I loved hearing my mom sing this morning. She's got a beautiful voice in Unitarian churches. Uh, Beautiful songs are being sung about exalted things. It's great to incline one's mind to that which is beautiful. But here, third day of retreat, nothing, just me and my breath, me and my body. And after 3 days of kind of taming the wild beasts of my own mind, peace. And it's like I naturally, through some level of training and past conditions, had kind of brought myself back to that anxiolytic. So lytic, calm down, the anxiety just collapsed. And I'm like, crikey, I can just sit here and watch my breath and I'm not hurting anybody. And I feel utterly blissful. I feel just like nothing I've ever experienced. And that totally changed my mind, both my heart, my trajectory in life, but that it was possible to experience a non-sensual pleasure and that it's trainable, that a human can train in that. So the Buddha was a human. The Buddha was a human, and through his own training, sitting underneath the Bodhi tree and practicing, he himself disinclining towards greed, anger, and delusion, inclining towards peace of mind and all-embracing loving kindness, was able to realize enlightenment for himself. And yeah, long story short, the remaining 7 days of that meditation retreat, they were up and down, as you might expect. Some, a little bit of heaven again, a little bit of hell, a little bit of just mundanity, just totally, meh, okay, I'm watching the breath. It's not the most boring thing ever, but certainly not the bliss I felt on day 3. And after that retreat, the suggestion was, okay, after this, try to keep the 5 precepts. In Buddhism, those are refraining from killing, from stealing, from sexual misconduct. And Buddhism, Unitarians, you will be very happy to hear that Buddhism, we are way ahead of the curve. No homophobia in Buddhism. Yeah, no homophobia in Buddhism all the way back to the time of the Buddha. He wasn't homophobic. This is 500 years before Jesus. Amazing. Okay, so no sexual misconduct. That doesn't mean, just be like a cisgendered male, heterosexual, whatever. It's, consensual, sensual relationships, sexual relationships, not lying and not doing intoxicants. So try to do those after this retreat is what I was told. And I did. I was a university student, so it took me a while to stop the intoxicant thing. But heading in this trajectory and every day, meditate for 2 hours, 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening. And I was basically sold, and that was religious. Basically, just after that, this was the lightning experience. My life was really heading in a new trajectory. And I did it, meditating for an hour in the morning, hour in the evening, and basically more and more inclining towards being a monk. I didn't realize that even that meditation retreat, it was teaching Theravada Buddhism, but it was so taught in such an ecumenical way, which it's very easy to do with Buddhism because it's really just about watching the body and watching the mind and learning how to relate to the heart in more and more skillful, less and less harmful, uh, better and better ways that, yeah, you can teach it in a very ecumenical way. So when I find out that this meditation retreat was teaching Theravada Buddhism, I'm like, I want more. I want more of that. So eventually found out that it was possible to ordain as a monk. And I'll read my final Thoreau quote, which, hold on to your seats. This is an awesome one. So this is really does explain why I went to the forest, just as Thoreau did. So as I was after that meditation retreat, it really did change my life. But I continued for another semester at university. Then my partner at the time, she was dropping out, so I decided to drop out. And um, long story short, before I made it to the monastery, traveling with her and working on organic farms, working at homeless shelters, all very Unitarian things to do, and ended up doing a pilgrimage to Walden Pond, and that's where this quote comes in. So I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why, then to get the whole ingenuineness, meanness of it, and publish its meanness to the world, or if it were sublime, to know it by experience, and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. So, yeah, I'll just allow that Thoreau quote, which is awesome. I'm glad nobody fell off of their seats. It totally had me falling off my seat when I read that. But yeah, I'll allow that quote to explain the last 25 years of my life. But yeah, so now I'm a monk starting a monastery. I did go to the forest, had a hard digital detox in our monasteries. I ordained in California, actually just about 3 hours north of here, a monastery called Abhayagiri, which pretty much all of the monks were not born into Buddhist families, but are all convert Buddhists. Similar to Unitarians, I just learned that 80 to 90% of Unitarians are convert Unitarians. I am one of the OG UUs, and I was born into this Buddhist Unitarianism. But yeah, ordained with a bunch of other convert Buddhists, which has the effect both of real intensity and sincerity and exploration. Like, we're not coming to this because we're trapped in any reason. I could have lived a very beautiful life. My brother and sister are living beautiful lives, and yeah, I feel like I'm living a really beautiful life as well. We're shepherding a community in Seattle, and yeah, it's beautiful. So if any of you ever want to come up to Seattle, we have something called Hospitality Stewards, which can maybe even find you a place to stay with some of our regulars. We have teachings in that church in the Triple Gym every Saturday. We have 3 or 4 teachings online every week. We have great interviews. Does anybody know Yuval Noah Harari? He wrote Sapiens, Homo Deus. We interviewed him. He's a meditator. We've interviewed bunches of Buddhists. Gil Fronsdale of the IMC right up the road in Redwood City. We interviewed him. He's great. Tara Brock, interviewed her. She's great. My mom came to the Zoom conversation afterwards. Shyla Catherine, and I could keep on going with all the cool Buddhists who we've interviewed. But yeah, I'll leave all that.